This is Cold Start.
And we're coming to you from the usual spot out here at Sonoma Raceway. You might hear some lovely engine tunes in the background. We got a nice track day going on here on Thursday, which is awesome to hear some cars out there.
It's awesome to see our fellow enthusiasts out there making good use of their machinery. There's a cool collection of things out there in the parking lot today, and these are performance cars being used the way they're supposed to be used.
Yeah, I hear a lot of Porsches out there, but the biggest thing is I'm glad that I'm hearing something on track. I'm hearing the engines, I'm hearing the cars. It seems like more so within the enthusiast realm, the only new cars that are getting introduced are EVs. And I understand this whole conversation about electric vehicles. It's like, all right, how many times can you just beat a dead horse of EVs are coming to kill the industry? But I mean, it's there, it's prevalent.
Yeah, we have our feelings about this. This has been unfolding for a very long time, and there's history here. But, let's accept the fact that there are certain things that these kinds of cars are good at, and there's other things that maybe they're not really ideal for. I think the big problem is we have this hammer so everything looks like a nail, and we've decided that EV is the solution, so we should get rid of the old thing and completely replace it. And I think that's so short-sighted. There's places where EVs are good, and there's places where internal combustion engines give us something that's good, that's different. And we want to have both of those as enthusiasts, so ¿por qué no los dos?
So the biggest piece of news that I think's come out in the last handful of weeks is these major manufacturers, which are mainly performance names, such things as Mercedes AMG, BMW M, Ferrari. And those manufacturers have been coming out with their EV cars, or announcing them at least, right? AMG announced their AMG GT 4-door coupe EV.
Right.
What a mouthful that is. And there's a couple contradictions in there as well, one of which being AMG and EV. But then also BMW's come out with their new M3, the next generation of M3, which they've announced is going to have an EV variant, which thank God it's not exclusively going to be optioned or available as an EV. They're also going to do an internal combustion. But then Ferrari, right? I mean, we've heard this as enthusiasts that Ferrari was going to be coming out with an EV with the Luce, and they announced that and have released photos, which most enthusiasts in the internet are just absolutely destroying Ferrari right now. And what the hell is this?
I mean, they had a huge opportunity to put a car that looked like a Ferrari out on the market, and instead they put this weird rounded toaster oven looking thing that nobody likes, whether you're an EV fan or not. We all have an aesthetic that's been developed over time based on how cars have evolved, and we have our preferences and things, but they completely missed on that. I think there was such an opportunity for them to take a leadership position, do the thing that Ferrari does best, which is make a car look cool and sexy and that people want it. Not these other goals. Like, those are fine to have, as we've discussed, but they completely missed on that. And AMG, man, I don't know what's up with their design department either. At least I'll give BMW a little credit. They've taken the whole company in this new direction with the Neue Klasse program that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so they're doubling down on it. They're thinking, okay, well, EV is going to be the first one into that world, so we can try to test the market and see how people respond to this completely new design language. Maybe it'll be a different audience and potential buyer for those BMWs than from the continuing to be offered internal combustion versions of that M3. I think that's kind of a cool test. They're going to let the market decide.
I definitely agree with you. Like, the benefit of the doubt for BMW here, like, I don't dislike the design of the new M3. I think, I like some of the characteristics that they brought back into it. I think it looks pretty aggressive. Like, I think it still is identifiably BMW.
Yes.
But bringing in kind of a new age design, not going so crazy into like the electric futuristic world that it looks alien almost, like AMG and Ferrari have done with their EVs. But this whole category of like performance sports car EV, I think that's where I have like the biggest bone to pick with this EV revolution that's happening within cars, because I don't want people to get me wrong. It's not like I'm like every EV is terrible and they all suck and die the electric car and I just want to burn fossil fuels. No, that's not it. But like there's just this interesting wave that's happening with the automotive industry that like they're turning everything EV. And it's like with these cars, the AMG GT 4-door, the BMW M3 EV, and the Ferrari Luce, it's like this is a different category of vehicle than we're normally used to.
That's right.
And And are these cars going to be successful in that demographic, in that market space?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know because these are, I think, as we've talked about before, these are generally additional cars for those buyers, right? If
Yes.
you're a Ferrari buyer, you also need your family car or your SUV or whatever. And okay, they've come out with a few of those offerings. But this is moving in a direction where they're trying to increase the customer base of the company, not unlike what Porsche did successfully back when they introduced the Cayenne and the Boxster back in the day.
Uh-huh.
So I think there's opportunity for them to move in that direction. They didn't get it right. And I think there's too much of this all in. We're doubling down. We see the way things are going, and we think we're accurately predicting the future here based on a lot of speculative data, a lot of want. There's a lot of wish going on here. Like, we hope this will all work out, so we're going to throw all of our chips into this, and we're going to make it work for ourselves. And if you look to see what's happened now, even the companies that aren't as much about the performance-oriented cars are having to retrench and retreat from their EV investments. Ford absorbed a $19.5 billion charge and has canceled their next generation of electric trucks. Honda, $15.7 billion write-down. The first time in their history they didn't have a profitable quarter. Stellantis, $26.5 billion. GM, $7.5 billion. All of this money was spent on something to try to solve for a problem that doesn't actually exist. So these companies are having to shift direction. We saw it with Porsche, right? In our Poor Porsche episode just a few ago, we learned about how they've lost billions and billions of dollars because they went too far with their performance variant cars into EV. People weren't buying the electric Cayman. People don't want an electric 911. But when it comes to the Cayenne, when it comes to the Macan, when it comes to those more family or utility or passenger regular vehicles, let's call them that, which Porsche has been successful to increase their customer base to include, EV for those is doing okay.
Yeah, and going back to what you're saying about like the Ferrari EV of like, there's people that buy Ferraris.
Right.
And then that's their extra car, right? These performance vehicles usually fit into that category of it's the extra, right? You have your daily, you have your normal usable car, and then the extra one.
It's very rare to find a daily Ferrari.
Which in Ferraris tried to do that, right, with the Pure Sangue, which is not a daily Ferrari, but it's more along those lines. But this concept of, creating the electric vehicle in the performance segment, the thing for me is like, are these cars even distinguishable from one another? Because if you look at like the Ferrari Luce, you look at the AMG, and you look at what BMW is going to be doing with this M3, like if we stick with those three cars, and I'm a consumer, I want to go buy these cool, fun EVs. How would I decide if I'm looking at a performance vehicle? I'm going to be looking at performance numbers. And if I look at the performance of the EVs between those three, they're almost identical.
Right.
It's not like one is substantially quicker or more powerful. They all have over 1,000 horsepower or the equivalent for an EV. They all can do, whether it's a high 2 second 0 to 60, a low 2 second 0 to 60, it's a 2 second 0 to 60. They're pretty much going to feel the same. So not only are we creating these new cars in a new category, but the way that consumers have to shop for these cars is completely eliminated. Because like in the past, if I was choosing between, I guess more so an AMG or an M3, there's a lot more distinguishment of like the engine, the sound, the feel, which now you've completely eliminated that of like they all do the same thing, but now the only thing that you're buying is either the badge, right, the nameplate, or, the looks and the styling. But if the performance is the same, and now we're only purchasing off of, the nameplate of the vehicle, how can Ferrari justify for the exact same performance a $600,000 car where BMW and Mercedes are going to be producing these things and selling them for around $100,000 for essentially the same electric vehicle with just a different body style?
That's right. And the drivetrains on these EVs are by and large the same, right? These direct-driven motors that turn the wheels.
Yeah.
And the feeling that you get in one electric car versus another is kind of the same. It's exactly the same technology of motors and electronics that are all working together to propel you forward in a very quick way. We'll acknowledge that. But now, step back for a second. As a performance car enthusiast, as somebody who likes to drive a car under load, there are characteristics and attributes of those cars that we're not able to quantify or at least characterize in this way that we're doing with the shorthand of 0 to 60 times, acceleration and deceleration times, that doesn't tell the whole story. When you're driving a 5,500-pound car that's, sure, screaming fast, and we could all see the numbers, and it says 0 to 60, 2.5 seconds, and we're like, wow, that's fast. That's approaching or equivalent to the fastest internal combustion engine cars.
Yeah.
But we're making this trade-off now because those cars are 1,500 or 2,000 pounds heavier than the equivalent of the internal combustion engine car. So what is it that we're gaining by moving over to this platform? The answer is always efficiency and environment, right? Cleaner emissions and monetary efficiency. The fact that we think that electricity at the rate it is consumed in a car that is charging a battery, and gas, which is being burned and combusted in an ICE engine and is being burned up, well, a lot of those computations in a lot of areas will prove out that the operating cost over time of an EV is cheaper. But let me ask you this question. How many of those computations did you do when you went to buy your performance car? Did you look at the gas mileage? Did you look at the overall lifespan? Did you look at support? No, you found the thing that gave you a feeling.
Right. And I think that's like why these manufacturers are setting themselves up for failure, especially when we're talking about electric vehicles in the performance segment, because who's the buyer for a performance vehicle? Typically, they're enthusiasts, right? I mean, there are the people that buy performance cars strictly for the badge and for the provenance and driving it around, be like, look, I have a Ferrari, and they don't care what's in the back of it in regards to the engine. But yeah, for the most part, when people go and buy these cars, it's not just the performance. It's not just the 0 to 60. It's the overall feeling. It's the overall experience. And the EVs bring or don't have that same sort of experience when you get behind the wheel.
Yeah, aesthetics are a subjective thing, but by and large, these cars are all pretty universally ugly. Now, there's variation in here, right? But the reason for that is that we're given, theoretically, is for aerodynamics reasons, right? These cars, again, were built for efficiency. So we want to reduce the coefficient of drag on these vehicles. We want to reduce the amount of rolling resistance that these vehicles have because we're trying to be as efficient as we can with them. We're trying to get more for less. And secondly, we're trying not to emit pollutants into the environment. I don't think any one of us is going to argue that's a bad thing to want. But we have to ask ourselves, are we solving the problem in the right place, or are we doing that plastic straws thing with this, where there's all of this plastic that's wasted, and we're going to go after this weird little niche use of it that didn't actually make a dent in the overall problem, but we confused ourselves. We do this sort of, let's call it virtue signaling thing. Like, I'm making a positive choice that other people are going to see me make, so it makes me look like I care or I'm on the side of good for this particular issue, to contrast the people who aren't on that and are looking like they're making the old, outdated, bad decision.
Yeah, and once again, like, I don't want people to think like I'm so anti-EV and I don't care about the environment and let's burn down the rainforest. Like, I don't want that to be the perspective. And unfortunately, I feel like for like most car enthusiasts, that's how they feel like they get painted, is like, I'm a car enthusiast. I love burning gas. I love that experience. There's a passion involved with that. And people just think that you don't care about the environment and you should be driving an EV. But like, what is the point of EVs and electric vehicles and electric cars in general? The main push is the environmental aspect of it, of like, we're not going to burn gasoline anymore. We're not going to pollute the environment. But like, if we think about that as our goal, and that is the point of EVs and introducing EVs, then why are we doing that in the performance car segment? Now, I understand if we look at performance cars, we might think like, okay, they're going to pollute the most, right? They're going to have the lowest fuel economy because they're going to have the biggest engines, and they're going to be driven by people that love to floor it everywhere and burn up, you know, this very valuable resource. But if we actually look at the statistics, if we actually want to make a change within cars and automobiles, if we look at performance vehicles in regards to the percentage of sales of new cars year after year, performance cars, meaning sports cars, you know, sporty-oriented vehicles. This isn't even just supercars. This could be an M3. This could fit into this category. They only account for about 3 to 5% of new vehicles sold per year. So if we're going after the performance segment to turn the performance vehicles all EV, we're not making a dent. And the thing is like, those are the people you're going to piss off the most, right? I'm going to have the biggest reaction if you take the M3 and you make it all electric, or, you know, the people that are responding with Ferrari. And in reality, this drama that you're creating, this controversy, now turning a set of people, car enthusiasts, against EVs because you're taking away their grandiose thing that they love so much, you're making an enemy out of these people and you're not making a dent within the market. Now, if we look in contrast of like, if we actually want to make a dent in regards to EVs on the road, what do you think the largest percentage of vehicles sold is year after year? Like category of vehicle?
Category of vehicle has to be light trucks.
Well, there's light trucks, yes, especially in America.
Yes.
Light trucks is a massive segment. But the biggest is compact SUV/crossovers.
Oh, these days, I'll bet, yeah.
This blob of a car, right?
Right.
You know, where it's not necessarily a compact hatchback, it's not necessarily a full-size SUV, it's an in-between thing. Now, yes, F-150s and pickup trucks, that is a large percentage, but the biggest percentage is compact SUVs, which accounts for about 60% of all new vehicles.
Wow, that's way more than I expected.
Over half,
Wow.
right? So if we're looking at EVs in terms of we want to change the landscape for cars and the use of EVs on the roads, all these manufacturers need to be creating compact SUV EVs that are affordable. And I think that's
right.
the biggest thing here.
Yeah, these are cars that are used for commuting, for running errands, for around town stuff, maybe even short road trips. They can be optimized for that. There is systems in place that we're building, right? We haven't figured out how to do it universally yet, but we're building out our charging networks. They're starting to learn how to make optimizations of the roads. There's things that they're doing to improve the overall experience such that for that use case, for the majority of people doing the majority of driving, it makes perfect sense. Like, let's acknowledge that.
Right. EVs have a place within the automotive market. And once again,
Right.
this is where I would say EVs are awesome.
Right.
EVs are great. Now, I can say it in a very controversial way, which is yeah, all of you commuters drive your EVs and save gasoline for me, right? This is a finite resource. Gasoline will run out at some point. There's only so much of it that exists. And if that's the case, if we only have so much gasoline, we might as well burn it in the most glorious, spectacular way. We might as well burn it in a V12 naturally aspirated Ferrari than a 4-cylinder Econobox that's just cruising, commuting on the day-to-day. We got to be realistic about this.
If this is a conservation of a limited resource, 100% agree with that. I think there's probably rationale, which is people want to say, if we don't burn any fossil fuels, well, that would be great, even if there were some left, right? So it's not that scarcity issue so much.
Yes.
But I feel you, and I know where you're coming from on this. It depends on how much you want to optimize for the problem, right? And something we didn't talk about was transportation and shipping globally, which is not the same as passenger cars on the roads, but accounts for far more of the pollution and the environmental impact than any vehicles on the roads. And we're completely overlooking that part of the problem. While I don't know how much you know about, global shipping, but those container ships that are out there.
Oh, the big barges?
Yeah, they burn this not totally refined sludge that's actually so much worse for the environment than an equivalent gallon of gas. They're harming the world in this way that we're all completely ignorant of and ignoring because we're focusing on the part of the problem that affects us. And we as consumers are being asked and actually regulated to be required to make this change in our behavior for environmental reasons. And it's kind of just like a big line of BS. I mean, you can't really take it with a serious tone if they're going to completely overlook the things like global transportation and agriculture, which use tons of resources, make a ton of pollutants, and we're not factoring that into this equation where we're telling everybody to drive an EV. So I think you're totally right. If you can optimize the use case for the solution, we'd be in a lot better state. And where we are now is convincing ourselves that EVs are the answers to all problems, and we're trying to apply it to things where it's not really the answer to the problem that we're asking. Somebody else might be asking the question, why can't we make all cars EVs? Enthusiasts are asking the question, why do you need to make these cars EVs?
Right. There's so many overarching conversations, like you're saying, this big picture, which is if we need to cut down on pollutants and save the environment and that the ozone doesn't burn up and all these sorts of things, there's bigger chunks to be tackled in terms of those ships offshore transporting goods and all that sort of stuff, or even airplanes and things like that, right? Where it's so easy to fight the consumer vehicle,
Yes.
Just normal transit, because that's something we engage with every day. We see it every day. I don't see those big boats offshore. They're in the middle of the water somewhere, right? It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so yeah, if we look at the overarching picture of like save the planet, is making all the cars on the roadways EVs going to solve it? No, right? And it's the same thing about like if each individual recycled everything perfectly in their household, it still wouldn't combat what the corporations do on larger scales in terms of pollution and garbage and things like that. But once again, if we hone back down and into the conversation of in regards to car enthusiasts of like EVs, what is the point, the implementation, and it's more like it's kind of overarching. And I think that's where my biggest gripe is like, yeah, okay, cool. EVs can have a place. And the thing is that, to be honest, as a car enthusiast, I could see myself having an EV as a daily. And then I have my fun enthusiast car that I don't want to be an EV, right?
That's right.
There's a balance here of like, on a day-to-day basis, just commuting, I don't need a car that burns fuel. It's actually annoying, right? And I think it's annoying for a lot of people. And this is why EVs are so appealing is like, all right, I'm using up oil. I'm going to have to do oil changes. I have to stop at the gas station so often to fill up with fuel. And it's like, I'm not even having fun with it. Like, if we're going to reduce the usage of this resource, let's at least have fun with the limited amount that we're going to be allowed to use.
Yeah, and back to that enthusiast mindset, we like to tinker with our cars and spend time on them. The average consumer doesn't want to spend any time or energy maintaining their vehicle. It is a utility. Whether they're their own car or it's a shared car that they have access to full time, ride sharing has gotten really popular, especially in bigger cities. If we took all the taxis and all the transport services and all the robot cars coming along, those should be EV. I have no argument with that. Any enthusiast who wants to argue against that, I'm asking you, how much performance are you getting out of the taxi you're riding in? You're not getting any. There's no benefit in your experience to having that be an internal combustion car. So great, let's make those EVs. But when we want to go drive at the track, or take that fun run out to the twisties and enjoy the handling and the experience of being out in the environment with our cars, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feeling, the vibration, all those things that you get out of a combustion engine, fine, let's apply it to the things it matters to.
Yeah, and that's why I really just don't understand the mindset of manufacturers of like why they're going after making their high performance vehicle an EV. Like, and there's just so many low hanging fruit to electrify that makes more sense, that's going to have more environmental impact and do more in this whole electrification, agenda.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're going like to the top of the pyramid down rather than going to this large base of general consumer vehicles that people use on the daily basis. We're going after this small percentage on the very top to be like, well, look at the performance of EVs and how like crazy fast they can be in this. And it's like, here's the deal. The people that would buy those cars don't care that they're EV.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else that would drive an EV because they don't care about cars don't care that they can go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And frankly, they should not have access to a car that can do that, right? That is a whole nother conversation. But it's
That's right, yeah.
There's just no reason that we need these performance EVs. And like you were saying in the beginning, BMW, for their M3, to my understanding, is the only manufacturer that's going to offer the exact same model, the M3, all electric and internal combustion.
In terms of enthusiast cars, that's the only one I know of. The only comparable I could have thought of is like the e-Silverado that came out.
Or same thing with the F-150, if you can get the EV or the pickup truck.
Right.
But for the performance car market, I think the M3 is going to be the first one to do it, of offer those side by side. And it is going to be really interesting to see the statistics come out of the sales of the new M3 of like, are people actually buying the EV? And the thing is like, if you offered me a BMW M3 with the internal combustion engine and it only made 600 horsepower, or I could buy the EV and it makes over 1,000 horsepower, right? And if we think like, oh, dumb car enthusiast just wants more power is better.
Wrong.
I think that a lot of people would actually be gravitated towards the lower horsepower car that's still an internal combustion engine, still has that sound, manual transmission if it is offered. I don't know if they've announced if it is or is not offered for the new M3, but I think they're going to see a lot of the enthusiasts would rather have that than the EV. And I would hope that these manufacturers, all this money that they're spending to do these like big flagship sporty EVs, I can't imagine how much money AMG, BMW, Ferrari spent on developing these cars.
Right, yeah.
If that money was spent on developing a cheap, affordable, consumer, compact SUV EV, we'd be so much more successful. And so I hope that like with this study that they're going to be doing, that they can realize it's like, that's pointless. This is worthless. if we actually want EVs to be successful, we need to be smarter and more efficient about how we implement that to sell it to the masses, not kill off and kill the dreams of enthusiasts.
This dovetails into the conversation where auto manufacturers these days feel the need to serve all markets, and I think they're missing the play as a result, right? Where we have BMW 1 through 8 series and variants for M for each of those, and then there's electric versions for each of those. At some point, the dust has got to settle. They have to kind of focus their efforts, and one of the reasons that we are fans of companies like BMW and Porsche and AMG is because they made cars that enthusiasts liked. Right. They had the performance characteristics or whatever those other characteristics are. Just say you're a car fan. Maybe you like a different kind of car than people who want to drive them fast at the track, but like you like a convertible to go cruise on the coast. Fine, you're a car enthusiast too. You like a different kind of car. You want to have that available to you to get what you want out of it. But the thing is, you're not trying necessarily to get a loud car if what you want is the wind blowing in your hair, right? Like there are people who want both of those things. There's people who want one or the other. And it's really about where these manufacturers should be optimizing. What is it that's in your DNA? What are you really good at? Stop trying to do the things that you're not. And it makes total sense. You look at the Chinese company landscape. BYD started out as a battery company. So their brand, Yongwang, when they're coming out with this U9 Extreme that's going to make like 3,000 horsepower equivalent, that also weighs 5,500 pounds, makes ridiculous sounds that are nothing like a performance car. It feels nothing like the driving style of anything that we want. I say, you know what? Let them go make the battery cars and the commuter mobiles and the taxis, and if at some point those made onto the roads in the United States, I wouldn't be so mad at that if we agreed that that's the best way to solve that problem and, there's fairness involved. But for these other things, like leave those cars alone. Leave the performance cars alone. Leave the specialty cars for the people who want to appreciate it and are willing to take on the higher overhead, the higher cost, the downsides that come along with that. We're obviously all kind of going along with taking the downsides of EVs that exist today with, the fact that the tires make all kinds of particulate matter into the environment because they're heavier vehicles that are shedding more tire and brake material, that the batteries that we haven't figured out how to dispose yet, we're only learning how to recycle, but we know how legitimate a lot of recycling programs really are. There's a lot of cover for people feeling good about things. There's a lot of problems, the charging networks, we don't have to go into all the problems of EVs. I was just saying that EVs aren't a perfect technology yet. There's work to be done. So let's not assume that's the solution for the long term for every kind of vehicle that we have.
Especially performance vehicles and these manufacturers that are having these identity crises. Because I want to go back to Ferrari, right? I want to go back to the Ferrari Luce. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that car specifically. And the biggest thing is like, who's going to buy that? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the market for the Ferrari Luce?
It's not me.
And that's the thing is like, is it Ferrari people? But like, why did people buy Ferraris?
It's because they wanted to affiliate with the brand and have people think something of them when they drove their Ferrari. Or there was something about the experience of driving the car or being in the car that made them feel a certain way.
And I think like the experience of driving a Ferrari, like you drive a Ferrari around and you want people to be jealous of you that you're driving a Ferrari.
Yeah, kind of.
Is anyone going to be jealous of you driving a Ferrari Luce? No.
I can't think of anyone.
Well, other car enthusiasts for sure aren't, right?
No.
Maybe normal people are just going to be like, oh, wow, Ferrari. And they're not going to think much of it. Mm-hmm. But you're going to get clowned. And the thing is like, you might be thinking like, oh, well, like, it has amazing performance. Like, it's the first Ferrari 5-seater, and it has this incredible performance. It makes, over 1,000 horsepower, 0 to 60 times of this, at the other. It's like, well, if you look at it, it's the same as a Tesla Plaid. A Tesla Plaid actually has more power and is faster than a Ferrari Luce, and it's a sixth of the cost. And I'm like, where is Ferrari getting the $600,000 number when we can see all these other manufacturers that basically are producing the exact same car underneath, right? Because an EV car is not that different from another EV car. They have the same performance, they have the same range, they have the same battery technology. Where does the extra money come from?
You're paying for the brand. You're paying for the marketing. All that money they spend to make people want a Ferrari so bad, but that they can't get it. That's where that cost goes. And they're making a ton of profit on top of that. So it's not an equivalent comparison in any way, right? And so for what we're trying to accomplish, which is having a car give us a feeling, then there need to be options that we have to kind of lean in on that and kind of make our choices with the money that we have for what's available on the market. And I think that this fact that we're trying to increase the pool of buyers for every single car company causes them to all compromise and create these crossover blob cars because it's designed by committee. It's a compromise. Nobody's happy with the outcome, but nobody's entirely dissatisfied. It's a weird state.
Yeah, I just can't get my mind over the whole fact of like an EV underneath, no matter what manufacturer it is the same.
Yeah.
Like it's not like there's a BMW electric motor, right? Where there used to be, BMW had to engineer their own internal combustion engine. They didn't borrow it from someone else. Where with all these EVs, it's like BMW's not making their own proprietary battery. They're not making their own proprietary electric motor. And it can't be that much different than the AMG motor or from the Ferrari motor or from the Tesla motor. Like, it's an electric motor. Like, how different can you make it? It's not like, oh, well, our EV motor makes this cool noise when it spools up. That's not artificial, right? I know they can pump sounds through the speakers, but it's like there's nothing identifiable about the drivetrain. And I think that's what's kind of crazy and what's shifting in the automotive space right now is that, like, with these performance manufacturers, when they would sell their cars, the drivetrain was a huge piece of the marketability for the vehicle, of whether it was an AMG, an M3, whatever it was, the top of the line stuff. The motor that they developed or the transmission or the differential, like all of these things were like their selling points, where now they've completely lost that. So now their selling point, the only thing that they can really sell on is the design and the technology. And those are just things that can like come and go. Those are trendy. That's not like BMW's always made a really good straight six motor, whether it was naturally aspirated or turboed, you would always go to them for that. But now they're losing the identifying characteristic of the vehicle.
Yeah, it's the character of that brand, ultimately. The engine in a car, let's draw the analogy, right, is like the heart. And you think about it, who are enthusiasts, people do engine swaps on cars. Well, that's interesting. I've never heard of anybody swapping the battery platform from one EV to another.
It's the same. It'd be a waste of time.
Right. There's no purpose to it. And let's acknowledge there are differences in technology as this stuff is all rapidly evolving, right? There's like the radial electric motors versus the axial flux, electric motors. But like all that stuff down there doesn't actually translate to a different driving experience. Like it might be one's faster, one's more efficient. At the end of the day, all they're doing is turning the rod connected to the wheels that makes it go. And it's not transmitting anything to you because it's not done with vibrations. It's not done with combustion and explosions. It's not done with exhaust. It's not done in a way that produces anything but loud tire noise on the street and these weird electronic soundtracks that we've pumped in.
God, this makes us sound so caveman of like...
In my day.
Well, it's like, my explosions need to make a certain noise and there's no explosions happening in an electric vehicle of like, we just want the boom. But like, and yeah, I guess there is technology, but like, maybe this is just me, but like none of that sounds sexy. None of that sounds interesting. And maybe that's just because it's above my head.
But no, we've tried to apply it. So Formula E is a perfect example of this. We said, okay, we love racing. We love cars. We love performance and sports. Let's acknowledge that this thing is polluting the world, and we're going to try to do our best to virtue signal and say, we're going to put batteries in our race cars. Come on, let's go. It's been a colossal failure. The racers don't like it. The teams don't like it. The manufacturers don't like it. It doesn't create a good product. People don't watch these races. There's no consumer base for them. It's a failure. Well, I thought about this. I'm like, well, maybe there's just something about car people that's a little different. Well, turns out there was also a Moto E, the motorcycle equivalent of Formula E. And it has also been canceled after a very short stint because the bikes are too heavy and it completely changes the dynamics of how people ride a motorcycle at speed. So autonomous racing, I mean, it exists, and it's come a long way, but it's not there, as we've talked about in other episodes. All of this stuff, performance, racing, entertainment, sports, we want to have cars that are oriented toward those things. Cars that make sounds, smells, vibrations. We want this. If you think we're cavemen because of it, fine. What is it that you're really into? Do you ride your bike on the weekends to get an adrenaline rush? Do you go jogging? Do you go whatever your hobby activity is? Do you go drinking? How good is that for the environment? Like, what is it that you're doing for fun that you're so virtuous about, that you're so much above everybody else that you're not harming the environment? You're not making any impact in your wake. How many kids do you have? How much pollution does that make?
Yeah, well, I guess you can think about like any sport creates waste,
yes.
right? Like if you think about going to a baseball stadium, all the fans have to drive there. I guess now we're back to cars. Anyway, but the teams have to travel. They have to fly. Like, there's nothing that's providing to the environment. It's not necessarily like more pollutant than a race. And this goes back to the conversation of like, if motorsports and car enthusiast is a section of the demographic and they love this thing, like, why take it away when we can implement EVs in a more strategic manner, which is the general consumer, the people that don't care, and they're not going to notice. Karen's not going to notice if you take her Honda CR-V and now it's all electric and it doesn't have a 4-banger up front. She doesn't care.
Yeah.
Do it to her first. Don't do it to the people that are going to notice, that do care, and then are going to be up in arms. And now you have these people lobbying against EVs when it's like, in reality, there is a place in the market for them. And we can outweigh, right? And that's, I think, the biggest thing is like, why does the mindset have to be eliminate everything internal combustion when it's like, no, let's be smart about this. Let's be efficient. Let's implement accordingly.
This is that all or nothing that we always have.
And is that dude that's driving his Ferrari on the weekend really solely killing the planet? No. And making that car an EV is going to have little to no impact. And I'm also going to argue, this is me getting on top of my soapbox, the thing is that a new vehicle in general is way worse for the environment than keeping an old one running on the road. And
100%.
We learned about recycling when we were in grade school, and it's reduce, reuse, recycle. And it's like, if we take old cars and we just make sure that they continue to run, that's way better for the environment than going out and buying a brand new car, which all of the environmental impact of the production of that vehicle, whether it's electric, hybrid, or internal combustion, is terrible for the environment. So me, driving around in my V8 BMW, maintaining it, keeping it on the road, rather than going and buying the brand new BMW M3 EV is actually better for the environment. Making sure that car just continues to run. So us car enthusiasts actually have a less carbon footprint, driving our old vehicles, caring for them, loving them, than just your general consumer buying a brand new car every 3 years.
It's true. There's something about those cars that we go and seek out that doesn't exist in the new cars, and that's also being lost because there's this telegraphed morality that it's not okay for people to do this thing that's bad, so nobody's going to be allowed to do it. It's an all or nothing kind of a thing. And there are shades of gray here that could be allowed. The same argument could be made about sports or entertainment. Well, nobody needs to go into a stadium to watch a baseball game and eat a bunch of hot dogs and leave a bunch of wrappers behind and expend energy to get to and from the thing and travel around. Like, why do we even have sports or entertainment for that matter? I mean, that's just wasted effort for stuff that doesn't matter, right? I mean, how far do you want to go? Is there a point to humanity, or are we just going to go get in our pod and the Matrix kind of feed off of us so that we could all be efficient and have the best possible time living in our little VR bubbles? I don't see the point of that, right? I don't want a living room on the road. I don't need that. I'm not looking for that. That's what's being marketed to us over and over again. I wouldn't mind having something that's easy to use and cheap to use and ubiquitous to the point where when I need it as a utility, it's there for me always and it's simple. And I have to think about it. But for all these other cases where I want to think about it. I want to spend the time and energy. I get enjoyment from that. Don't take that away from me.
Yeah, I think it's just so crazy that the conversation, it isn't just we can have both. And that's the thing is and we see this in Formula One is they're trying to turn those cars into effectively Formula E's, and they're trying to go net zero carbon footprint in Formula One. And we can see that every step that they make to make those cars more environmentally friendly, introduce a hybrid system, introduce battery technology, it's making the product worse and worse. And the thing is is there things that Formula One can do outside of the actual product of the racing that can be good for the environment and then allow the cars themselves to be full-blown entertainment machines of bring back the V8s, bring back the V10s, bring back the V12s, and do something else elsewhere that can help. Maybe the way that they transport those cars around. Maybe they can reschedule some of their races so it's more efficient in the way that they transport the cars around the world, that we don't go from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern, back to the Western, back to the Eastern. We can clump some of those races together. When they come to the States, go to Miami, then COTA, then Las Vegas, then go back to the other place. There's other things that they can do to help their emissions rather than ruin the product.
I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy here because the people who are making these decisions, okay, it's not the drivers who are making these regulations or decisions about what fuel they're going to use or what the requirements are for the car, right? There's an organization upstream from that. In F1, they call it the FIA, or that rolls up to the ACO, whatever. There's some sanctioning body. There's a government organization. Somebody's regulating something. And the thing is, I will guarantee you that almost every single one of those individuals is flying private wherever they're going.
Yeah.
How much is that doing for the environment? What about all of that flying and all of that transport and all of that inefficiency that you just talked about in the logistics of a sport that's global like Formula One? It's ridiculous how much more that is than all of the cars and all of the fuel and all the testing and practice and tires that are burning up. None of that even compares to all these airplanes and shipping containers that they're sending around.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely ridiculous.
So, I mean, what is the answer? The answer is that there is a proper solution for some problems that isn't always the right solution for all problems. And we need to learn how there can be some nuance and an opportunity and room for people to make their own personal choices, not to have those choices removed by regulators, by politicians, by people who have other interests in mind. They're trying to virtue signal. They're trying to look good for getting reelected or for having their entertainment form not be demonized the way it has been demonized in the past for the aspects of the fact that these cars are burning a fossil fuel. There's plenty of other things where we can set our time and energy if we want to spend this much on it to make the problem overall better for all of us, and everybody will be happy. Commuters have their commuter cars. Performance people have their performance cars. The shipping industry can be more efficient and not demonized for that stuff. They can work to improve. All of these things can coexist. We just have to create sort of the will for that, the structure for that, and not try to solve everything in this sort of binary switch way where, okay, we're going fully from ICE, internal combustion engines, over to EV. Well, guess what? The first cars that ever existed, back in the 1820s, we had these buggies that were attached to horses. The first attempt to ever automate that was electric. They were batteries. In the 1860s and 1880s, the first cars that were made were electric, but the battery technology was nowhere near what the combustion technology that followed it by about a decade could accomplish. We never went back at that point because there was no point. We had a solution to this problem. We had infrastructure. We've built this thing up. We already revisited that technology. Now, maybe it's time to do that again. Science has advanced. Chemistry has advanced. We know things that we didn't know back in the day. But we didn't need necessarily to solve for every use case at that time. That was for that one thing that came out. It's expanded into this global market, right? Transportation wasn't a service before that. There were ships. You could take stuff from continent to continent on a ship. That was all you had. Yeah. Other than that, there was no such thing as transportation. It was horses and ships. And so now we've created this whole environment and this market of transportation and moving vehicles. And we've figured out a way to put them to use for humanity, for our own utility, and for our own fun. So let's treat them separately for those purposes. Just like we do saying sports is for fun and entertainment, we can have that be here. And that exists in a way that we allow there to be a use of all of that grass that's as efficient as we could have it be.
Golf courses,
football fields, there's a lot of grass on those. Well, that's a lot of using of watering that grass. I mean, come on, there's a point at which, why do we exist as humans if we can't enjoy our life, the environment at which we are, figure out how to use the planet and all its resources that it gives to us, and be stewards of that, be responsible for that, but we can have our cake and eat it too. We're smart enough as a species to do this.
Yeah, and it's being an environmentalist. If you really want EVs to be successful, we need to be smarter about the implementation and find the largest use case of vehicles, which is not performance cars. It's not cars being driven for fun. It's just the general commuters, the general consumers. And we can learn a lot from history, right? It's time and time again, history repeats itself. And if we think about the early days of the automobile, of course, there was those cars that were flamboyant. Cars were for the rich because they were expensive to make, the technology that went into them. They were very flamboyant in their design, this, that, the other. Now, if we think about when automobiles made that transition to be massively accepted or used in the masses,
right?
When did that happen?
That's Model T, assembly line, Henry Ford.
We all think about the Model T, right? That was the car for the people. And what was the design? What was the marketability of the Model T?
You could have it in any color as long as it's black.
And it was affordable. People could afford it. It wasn't this like big special use case of an automobile.
That's right.
It was the basics. It was the fundamentals. It was cheap. And so if we look at that, if we want EVs to be massively accepted and massively used, it's not transitioning and going after the performance vehicles or the luxury models or whatever the case is. It's creating one that can be afforded by the masses and used by the masses. So leave the goddamn car enthusiasts alone. They're not killing the planet. As much as the tree huggers want to say that, I'm one of those people too. I love the environment. I don't want to overly pollute. But there's also like, I understand that my impact, my carbon footprint of being a car enthusiast really isn't that large in comparison to everything else. And so it's like, we're all on the same page here. You don't need to come after me because I'm the easy target. Go after the people where it's actually going to make a change.
One of the things here is like the controls in place for this, right, are through government, through regulations, and those are imposed on citizens, like end user consumer people. While all this grandstanding is happening, all of this stuff is going on in this very performative way for people to say, look, I'm doing the right thing here, but you're not actually helping to solve the overall problem. You're just following orders. The politicians, they don't have the will to make the hard decisions. They're just going to go where the lobbyists are telling them to go, where it's convenient for them to go. The shipping and transportation industries, the agriculture industries, they give a lot more money to those people in power than the tax base of the average citizen. So that's who they're listening to. That's who they're solving for. Don't get caught up in that. Make sure you're optimizing for your own use case. And if the technology being offered is good for you, if electric vehicles help solve a problem for you, if they're cheaper, if they're more efficient, if they do for you what you need, great. Go use them all day long. This is where sort of our capitalist system is supposed to allow the market to decide. And here we are taking away options because we already decided that those were the wrong ones. Let people decide. Let them go buy it. If they think it's the right thing, it will exist. If they think it's the wrong thing, they won't buy it. It will go away.
let the factors of economics be at play. And it's like, yeah, make your own choice as a consumer of like, if you believe that the future is EV and everything needs to be electrified, buy an EV. Be one of those people that has an electric vehicle and does that and makes the change. But just realize that like that person that has a performance vehicle, they make up such a small percentage of the cars that are on the roadways. That one individual is not solely killing the planet, and them transitioning to an EV is not going to solely save the planet. And it's moving in the masses of general consumer vehicles. I think that's where the focus needs to be. And it's not that I wish that these manufacturers fail. It's that they are failing. Porsche is failing because of their decisions to go electric in a market that doesn't respond to that. AMG is going to realize the same thing. BMW is going to be the most interesting case study because they're actually going to have comparative numbers to see if enthusiasts really do respond to electric. And maybe I'm going to be proven wrong, right? But I think it's going to be interesting to see what the facts actually are. And I think this has been a very healthy release of the rant about EVs because I think there's a lot of misconceptions that car enthusiasts just hate EVs because they're cavemen and they want their booms, bangs, and explosions. But no, it's just we care so much about cars. We care about the industry. We care about that mode of transportation. And we see that there's a lack of efficiency in the way that we're going about this. And it's like, if we truly believe in EVs, it's not eliminating the V8 performance car that's going to make the EV successful. That's just not the case.
Let's also say this. As enthusiasts, we should also recognize there are times when we don't need that enthusiast car. And I know I've found myself cramming myself into an uncomfortable seat, driving something that had too stiff suspension for the road I was driving on. And we do it because it's fun. We make excuses for it. We're kind of gluttons for punishment. That's part of the experience of enjoying a car, is feeling it and moving with it and all of those things. And you know what? Go use your utility vehicle for the utility you have in mind and let me do what I need to do.
Well, I think this has been a great dive and dissecting of EVs in the marketplace and where EVs do and don't belong.
Yeah, I think our parting word should be EVs aren't bad. EVs aren't inherently a negative thing. Let's accept that too. The thing is, they're not the solution to all problems.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Sylas.
And thanks for listening. This has been Cold Start.